Welcome to Digging Deeper into Spiritual Practices, a Spiritual Seedlings interview with Nancy Flinchbaugh. I'm the author of several books, including Awakening, a contemplative primer on learning to sit. I want my readers to have opportunities to learn more about the spiritual practices discussed in my book, so I'm interviewing some contemplative experts. You can find out more about my books on my website at spiritualseedlings.com. Today, I'll be interviewing Maggie Oman Shannon about the spiritual practice of gratitude. Hello, and welcome to Spiritual Seedling Interview with Nancy Flinchbaugh. Today, I'm interviewing Maggie Oman Shannon, who is a senior minister at the Unity Spiritual Center of San Francisco. And she has written a book on crafting gratitude, along with a lot of other spiritual books. But today we are talking to her about gratitude. So I want to welcome Maggie and ask you, Maggie, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and how gratitude became so important to you in your life.
Well, thank you, first of all, Nancy, for having me. I'm very happy to be here and to talk about gratitude and anything else that comes up. Let's see, the shortest version. I always knew I wanted to be a writer, and I started my career as a journalist, actually. Moved into nonprofit marketing work, and then ended up here in San Francisco, and in 2000 started my own business called The New Story, which was a combination of editing, writing, spiritual direction. I had just become a spiritual director. But in 1997, I wrote my first book called Prayers for Healing. So that's what kind of got me in the spiritual track. And I did that as director of marketing at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And that really expanded my concept of what prayer is. So I've always been on a spiritual journey since the age of 15. And my follow-up book to Prayers for Healing was called The Way We Pray. And that was a book in which I researched and wrote about 50 different prayer practices from around the world, many of which were creative. So I tried out a lot of these because I've always been interested in art and felt I was creative. And my experiences working with those creative prayer practices led me to write a book called Crafting Calm, which came out, I think, in, 2013 maybe. And Crafting Gratitude, the book we're going to focus on today, was just an extension of that. So that's sort of a long way of saying I've always been interested in spirituality. I started looking at prayer and prayer forms, found that many of them were creative, and that eventually led to Crafting Gratitude.
Wow, that's quite a journey. And that's really exciting because I think, a lot of times in churches we have a very traditional ways of praying, and then there's meditation. But in between tradition and meditation, there's a lot of other possibilities. And I'm looking forward to looking at some of your other books about that, on how you've developed the creative ways to pray. I always enjoy, creative ways to do my spirituality too. So tell me about gratitude. I guess that's really important to you also. How has that become so important in your life?
The older I get, the more I realize how important gratitude is. So, we're raised hopefully we're raised with the suggestion of always giving thanks for what we have, counting our blessings. But I think as we grow older, we realize more and more that there's always going to be something to be challenged by. Life is just complex, and it's always easy to focus on what's going wrong. It's not always as easy to focus on what's going right. But I think people who have developed that practice of being intentionally grateful for things have found that life is so much more enjoyable and goes so much more easily when we focus on what is going right. So what was exciting about working on that book is that I was researching a lot of the science regarding gratitude. And there is a lot of scientific evidence that focusing on gratitude, not only is it a wonderful spiritual concept, but it actually helps us physiologically. It helps our physical being as well as our mental and emotional health. So, I'm convinced that a gratitude practice is probably the most important spiritual practice we can even develop.
It's certainly been a challenging year, 2020, with the pandemic here in California, where I know the wildfires have been raging, and then our political divisions. How has this gratitude practice helped you in 2020, I wonder?
Great question. And certainly I've had my moments where I wasn't focusing on all the things that were going right and what I had to be grateful for. It is a practice, and it is something that we need to come back to. But one of my most favorite sayings is, this is not happening to you, it's happening for you. And that right there is an immediate shift to going from feeling like a victim to looking for what might be a hidden gift or blessing in whatever the experience is. And so, yeah, like all of us, I've needed to remind myself of that sometimes. What are possible gifts that are coming out of all this? What is something that I can personally and intentionally shift, so that it becomes a positive thing, not a negative thing.
Yeah, I've had that discussion with a lot of people during the pandemic, and it does seem like as terrible as things are, on the one hand, there are a lot of blessings too,
Yeah.
as we slow down, as we stay at home more, as we have more time with our
Exactly.
families or people we live with, more time to garden. I've really enjoyed that. Just being present to my flowers and vegetables did a lot better this year.
Yeah,
I was home and had time to water. So you have a book, Crafting Gratitude, and you talked about that a little bit, which was published in 2017. And it's very creative, and it gives a lot of, as I've looked at, a lot of different ways to practice gratitude with crafts. And can you talk a little bit about the book, how that came to be? And
Sure. So as I mentioned, the very first book, it's actually a series of 3, and Crafting Gratitude is in the middle. So it started with Crafting Calm, that came out in 2013, and then Crafting Gratitude, as you noted, 2017, and then the last book in the series was Crafting Love. And probably the best way to explain why my focus was on creative things is that it's a conception of prayer that I hold. And it's interesting because I was just on a panel recently talking about prayer, and they were asking us for a definition. And I said, I can appreciate the definition many of us have heard, that prayer is talking to God and meditation is listening to God. But my concept of prayer goes a little bit beyond that, in terms of, I see prayer as communing with God. And personally, I find that I am very connected, to the divine of my understanding when I'm doing something creative. That I found that can be such a wonderful time of communion with God. So that's how I got into the craft thing. Is that I really believe in, and I think one of the questions you may be wanting to know more about, you had written it down. About a gratitude practice, which is great, and I'll look forward to talking more about that. But I think what's really important for any spiritual practice is to find out, what are we naturally inclined to do? Because if something is so foreign to us or feels so uncomfortable, it's not going to be a practice that we're going to keep up for very long. So I sort of, knew that there are a lot of folks out there who like to express their creativity. And of course, I could wax philosophically about that if you wanted me to, but I wanted to give people an opportunity to channel their spiritual feelings, experiences, understandings into something that they could actually make. And Crafting Gratitude specifically talks about crafts that you can give to express your gratitude for something. So the book is separated into different sections on, things that you can give to express appreciation for somebody or something in your life. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of your favorite ways to craft gratitude?
So one of the things I wrote about was pet memory beads. That is an offshoot of prayer beads. That's a very important craft for me, which is interesting because I was not raised Catholic, and so I didn't grow up with this understanding or use of prayer beads, but now it's a very important and beloved practice. And I actually co-wrote a book with another woman on how to make and use prayer beads, even if they haven't been part of your spiritual tradition. All of us can use prayer beads, very intentionally for different things. So the prayer beads have always been a constant in my practice. And in crafting gratitude, I talk about making a memory strand for a beloved pet. To show gratitude for a pet that you might have had that, meant something significant to you. And so I specifically referenced one that I did for my very first cat, Luna. And I did the beads for the colors of her fur, and I did different charms that represented aspects of her, including a little tiger eye moon, since her name was Luna. And I still have them, of course. And that was a very meaningful gratitude craft for me because she meant a lot to me.
I like that when I read that in your book, that you can just have the prayer beads and in your purse maybe, and you're at the store waiting in line, you can pull it out and start thinking about each bead, something you're grateful for. It's
Yeah.
just a very simple thing, but it really reminds you to give thanks. I went to a workshop a few years ago where we were encouraged to make earth prayer beads.
Yeah.
And it was to pray for the earth, but also to pray about what you can do, and there was a people bead, and I was supposed to pray, what can Nancy do about the earth? Which, when I first started doing that, I was overwhelmed. And then I started to realize, oh, wow, yeah, there's a lot I can do. And that's, been a transformative experience. So I think prayer beads are very helpful. I've found that also. Yeah, so let's see, what else can we talk about here? What, so what suggestions do you have to somebody if they want to incorporate gratitude practice in their life? What would you recommend?
Yeah, similarly to what I was just saying, I would note, for people to find a practice that they're going to stick with, one thing that helps is to sort of understand how you learn best. So some of us are visual learners. I am. And so anything that's visual is very helpful to me. Some are auditory learners. Maybe music would help bring them into a particular state of gratitude. They might want to work with, bells or some kind of instrument. And then there's the kinesthetic learners who, prayer beads actually would be a wonderful practice for them because you're holding it in your hand and actually feeling them. So I think having a natural understanding of where you go is helpful in terms of finding a practice that you're going to really love and stick with. But the basic one, of course, is one that's talked about all the time, and that is just to say 3 to 10 things that you're grateful for at the end of every day. And if 10 seems too overwhelming, then start with 1, start with 3, and then move up. But that's something everybody can do. It doesn't take any particular tools, just the desire to want to find more things to be grateful for in your life.
And we know that can be transformative. I think just a simple thing, but it really does shift your orientation, as you said earlier, physiologically and psychologically. It's that positive, the shift to positive. I have a practice that I try to do on Thanksgiving, which is coming up, is to write down 100 things I'm thankful for. And I remember the first time I did that, my whole body just started to tingle.
Yeah.
I thought, wow.
So
But I do.
awesome. Yeah, and I mean things like I'm looking at your sunflower. I happen to love sunflowers, and for me they're a symbol of creativity. But it can be that simple, and sometimes we think it has to be something grand or big or profound to give thanks for. But it can be as simple as a sunflower, or the light coming in through the window, or there's a multitude multitude of things always to be grateful for if we just take the time to look around and think about them.
I agree. I usually start in the morning, and almost always I say I'm grateful for a new day. It's simple, but it's new, it's brand new, and it's wonderful. So I'm
In
always
particular
very,
during this time of pandemic, I mean, my gosh, what a gift, right? That
mhm.
we have new days and to be healthy in particular when that's not the case for, many of us. So absolutely, the gift of a new day should never be thought of as something rote, right?
And I think one of the practices is also to appreciate people in your life. And that's what a lot of the crafts are, expressing appreciation, I think, right?
Yeah,
And that's really important.
yeah.
Well, you're very prolific. You mentioned several of your books that you've already written. Do you have anything you're working on now?
I
What's
do.
coming out next?
Yeah, I'm actually working on a book now, and it's due February 1st. So I've got to put the pedal to the metal, but it's on hope. And I'm just so excited to be working on it because I have felt the need for hope. And I think a lot of us have felt the need for hope during this time. And so it's going to be an anthology of quotes about hope. It'll be a day book. So there'll be 365 different looks at hope. And I'm very excited about it.
Well, thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I really appreciate your work on gratitude and creativity. I know Daniel Wolpert once wrote a book, Creating a Life with God, and he said once that anybody who is close to God longs to create. And so I've
Oh,
always thought that too, like when we get so creative, that's part of our spirituality, and it's God's spirit working through us. So I love your take on all this. It's been wonderful to meet you and talk with you and learn about your approach to crafting gratitude.
oh,
So,
thank you so much, Nancy. And I've got one last quote too. Would you like me
sure.
to end with another wonderful quote like you just did? This was from Albert Schweitzer, and he was talking about how important gratitude is, and said, "The greatest thing is to give thanks for everything. He who has learned this knows what it means to live. He has penetrated the whole mystery of life, giving thanks for everything." So I think that, in a nutshell, is such wonderful encouragement for expressing our gratitude. And I want to express my gratitude to you for having me on. It's been a delight.
Well, you're welcome, and it's been my honor. So, amen, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Happy Thanksgiving.
And, and to you and to all of our listeners.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this interview with Maggie Oman Shannon, an ordained Unity minister, an author, an artist, a spiritual director, and retreat and workshop leader with the News Story. And she's also currently the senior minister at the Unity Spiritual Center in San Francisco. She was talking about her book, Crafting Gratitude, in this interview, which is available on Amazon and also on the library's resource Hoopla. This is a wonderful book with suggestions for crafts to encourage the practice of gratitude and appreciation. She's also the author of 8 books and has a new book coming out on hope in February 2021. You can find her books on Amazon. Find out more about Maggie and how to contact her on her website at maggieomanshannon.com. This has been a Spiritual Seedlings interview with Nancy Flinchbaugh. You can also find out more about gratitude and other spiritual practices on my website and in my book, Awakening, a Contemplative Primer on Learning to Sit.